Hello and welcome to our cat. My name's Lee Boyd and thanks for being with us. Anybody watched this last week? A complete nightmare with cameras. They kept breaking down, so we stopped it halfway through and then I restarted back up again. And I was working on a portrait that I was self-portrait that I was putting into the competition for the portrait Sky Portraits. There we are. Let's click the mic off. I was putting a portrait in for Sky Portrait Artist of the Year competition. Now I can't show you the end result because part of the conditions is you don't blast it all over social media and things. So the closing date for that I think is the 27th or 29th of January. So there's still a bit of time to have a go yourself, and I would encourage you just to have a go, even if it's just the process of trying it out, going through the process, filling in the forms and things. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, but it's a bit of a buzz, and especially on social media as well, especially on Instagram, because during lockdown Sky Arts produced a series of about 20 different portraits over sort of 2 separate sessions during lockdown over the last year, where they had celebrities come in and sit for 4 hours on a Sunday, and they had a artist from previous shows working through the process of creating a portrait, and then you could upload your attempt at capturing that week's celebrity. And it was really interesting. But what's really happened is a nice collection of artists from all over the world, not just the UK, from all over the world, started posting up what they did. And I think if you go to the hashtag MyP8OTW, which is my portrait artist of the week, put the hashtag in front of it, and there are something like 37,000 portraits. Now some of them are self-portraits that people have done for the competition, some are portraits that they did with celebrity scissors. The really interesting collection of different approaches, different styles, and as a way of finding out, especially if you're starting off, it's very hard to kind of fathom out what's your medium or what's your style. What's really good is you've got people from all different abilities having a go, and it's great to scroll through these things to try and find a source of inspiration. You can find out artworks that you particularly like, or styles that you like, or mediums that you like, and you can click and follow those artists and see what other works they've done, and it can help you. It's a great way of doing a little bit of research without necessarily having the idea that research is a really laborious process. It's actually quite a lot of fun just to sit there with your phone and sort of scroll through visually, finding out things that stimulate you artistically. Got a couple of people here already. Kathy, welcome back. It's great to see you again. And yes, Lenny, hello. Good to see you too. If I'm right in saying, yes, you were the sitter for one of the finalists for Sky Portrait Artist of the Year. Is that right? I might be wrong, but you've got a very similar name. And if it is you, thank you for coming. Thank you anyway for coming, if it's not you. So this week I am going to work on a portrait by Sargent. Now, it's from the book that I've got up on the screen there, John Singer Sargent, Portraits in Charcoal. It's a book that I bought for me for Christmas, and it was great just to see the book and go through his portraits that are not necessarily well publicised. A lot of these portraits in charcoal were done for the great and the good of the day, if you like, and they would people that he knew, but they paid him to come along and sit and do these portraits. He did them over in his studio in New York and studio in England, in various places around the world. And what was interesting was his approach to it, and the book in itself gives you a little bit more insight into the people behind the portrait. Often you don't get that insight into the people. You often just left the image and you go, wow, this is amazing. It's a beautiful image, and you can sort of marvel in the expertise in the way he drew. Obviously his paintings are very well known, his portraiture especially. He got a bit jaded with portraiture, believe it or not, and he went then into doing landscapes. But obviously when you mention Sargent in general, the portraiture pops to mind. But what was interesting about the book, as I said, there was a little insight into the people behind the portrait, And what I noticed, where these people were like industry leaders, they were royalty in some cases, they were celebrities of the day and things like that. When I started reading through some of the stories of them, how much they gave back, and the one I'm going to do today is actually the front cover. This is Sybil Sassoon, and she was actually in, I think, World War II. She volunteered for the Royal Naval Service, the Wrens, and she was the deputy to the director during the Second World War, which she received, I think it was a CBE. Now, I don't kind of want to pour scores. When we look at celebrities of today and how they're celebrated, a lot of them do give back, but the stories behind these people, these portraits, we never get to hear them, and we never get to sort of investigate them fully. So the book was lovely, and it got me engaged into trying to understand how he both sat the sitter and what comes out through the portrait, and there's a sensitivity to that, and it was just something that really captured me. And when I was looking for the book, I thought, I'd really like to have a go. So this is the thing we're going to do today. This issue was so great to see you. I thought you were brilliant on the show. There was such a warmth between you and your artist, and I hope you enjoyed it. I know because I think, filmed that during lockdown, where, well, it wasn't necessarily lockdown. It was they didn't have the general public around you, and normally, I think on the show, when you get to the semi-final stage, they introduce a local celebrity to you, or a local person of note in your area, and you get to work with them in that way. And they asked you this year to paint somebody who's important to you, and I thought all of the portraits that were done were beautifully sensitive, because there was a real connection between the artist and the sitter, because that connection was obviously there already because it was somebody they knew. And I think that came out wonderfully in your portrait. It's such a difficult competition. I take my hat off to everybody who gets on that show. We all sit back and sit there and judge people, because we're just left with the image at the end of the day, and it's a very condensed, edited program into sort of an hour. When you're there for basically a full day, you're not painting for a full day, but you're there for a full day, and you don't get the insight as to what that takes. And I think with a portrait where people were painting and they had time when they got to the semi-final to spend time working on something and honing what they really do well, but together with a sitter that is meaningful to them, was wonderful, because they were so rich. And I kind of wished part of the judgment, rather than it just be, I did take it into consideration, obviously, but that portrait in the 4 hours is, for me, should be like the deciding factor. And I think most of the judging should have been done on those portraits, because they were so good. So well done, and it was great to see. Michael, hello, good to see you too. And Ethan, my son, good to see you. Or not see you. Ethan's over in Holland. Hope you're doing well, son. So yeah, as you can see, both cameras are working this week, which is great. Hopefully they'll continue to do so, and hopefully we won't have any problems. I've got a little bit of green screen flare going on here, so I'll try and shift that without knocking over the green screen. It's just so you don't have to get my oh, yeah. Is that working? That's even worse. There we go. It's just so you don't get my background taking over more of the image that I'm going to draw on the screen. One of those things. Ethan's dad, POG. You see, I am so old now that I turned 50 this week. What does POG mean? give me a heads up. Hope it's something nice. So yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Roll my sleeves up and get started. I'm going to be working in charcoals again this week. I have heavyweight paper on my board. I work in a vertical plane. It's just so people often ask, well, why are you working upright? That feels a bit weird. Nobody sat down. Dad. Okay. Cool. I like that. I'll take Art Dad. I'm quite happy with that. Yeah, so I'm working in a vertical plane, and people often ask, well, do I have to work on a vertical plane? Is it better to work on a vertical plane? I will always say, work to what's comfortable for you. There are some benefits working on an upright plane because you're right in front of it and you can see it straight on. Often when people start off, they're drawing on a table and it's laying out in front of them and they're sat back and they see their paper from a different perspective, and it can sometimes skew the image that you're creating. So one of my early encouragements to people is, if they can, is to try and work on a vertical so they can get used to seeing their image that they're creating straight on. It also means that when you're working from your reference, you've got my reference on, where are we? Here, there. You've got my reference on the screen there. I've got my book down here on my left hand side, so I can see both my image and my hand at the same time, and I'm not moving around. Often if you're drawing even from life, if you're moving around to try and see what your image is, your perspective is constantly changing and shifting, and then if you've got to turn around or look down to your drawing plane, that's when information can get slightly lost, even if it's just a split second. So if you can, I would suggest this, but it doesn't mean to say it's necessarily better. If you can get really comfortable and get over the top of your drawing and get into a comfortable position to draw, and that works for you, that's fine. It is very much down to what works for you best, what you feel comfortable with. But if you have never done it before, try it, have a go. It can feel a little bit weird to begin with because obviously it's a different way of drawing. The mediums I'm going to be using, as I said, were charcoal. I'm going to be using charcoal pencils like Generals with a medium, a range of different charcoals. So I've got a hard, a medium, a soft and an extra soft charcoal pencils. The hard ones to begin with are very light, so it helps me figure out where things are on the page, and I think you saw that from well, if you haven't watched it already, from last week's self-portrait that I started off, were very, very light marks, and it was literally breaking down the structure of everything. Then I would move into sort of building up some of the forms, and I might move to a medium with the light as well, using various different techniques about filling forms and filling spaces, to darkening down pages and things like that. I've got some compressed charcoal. Compressed charcoal is very uniform because it's manufactured. Other than like natural willow, like the willow charcoal you would maybe have had in school, which is kind of puffs off into dust. I'm going to be using pan pastel as well. Pan pastel works great with charcoal, and there's also, I don't know if I'll be using it today, but you can get a vine charcoal called Natrum, and it is a natural charcoal, but it's quite well produced, and what I mean by that is it's very consistent, and you can get it in different grades, like the charcoal pencils in hard, mediums and softs and things like that. So that's what we're working today. POG is an emote on Twitch of a dude looking very excited. Yeah, that's me. I like that. If you have any questions, by the way, through this, do ask. I just put the post up, and when I was putting the post up to kind of advertise we're doing this morning, I was saying half the conversation is half of the fun. It's sometimes more than half of the fun, because it is about a chat. It's a conversation that we're both going to have. Things that are frustrating you, things that you'd like to know about art, things that you have come across yourself. I want to give a shout out as well, quite quickly, to a couple of different podcasts, if you like, or people working in a similar format. There's a guy over on Instagram called Dan Ferguson. He's based in Northern Ireland, and every Friday he's having a conversation with an artist over in, I think in the States, might be in Canada, I'm not sure. And he had one yesterday, and I was watching it this morning, came across it, and it was just a great conversation. It lasted for about an hour. So I'm going to quickly pop his link to his Instagram page over on the chat and quickly post it up for you. So check out Dan, very interesting artist, great information in his conversation and the conversation around art as well. And they were talking about artists having a say in what's going on in their time, so kind of the politics that might surround art and infuse your art, might be the conceptual side of it as to why you're doing the art. And certainly with the events that have gone over in the States lately, and the memes that have gone with Bernie Sanders and things like that, they pop up in artworks and things. Quite an interesting conversation, so check that one out. And the other one I'm going to pop up is a little bit more technical. His name is Stephen Bauman. His podcasts over on YouTube were brilliant. It's so informative. I've learnt a lot from them. I definitely share things out. It's not a case of, because I'm doing my my podcast on a Saturday, that I don't share anybody else's. So if I come across anything that I find of interest that I thought, oh, these are really good, I'll share them. And likewise, if you have any information like that and you want to share it or talk about it, please do. More the merrier. If you're doing any courses, because I know some of you are not necessarily based here in Northern Ireland, but you might be based elsewhere. Ethan, you're over in Holland. So Scully, are you in Holland as well? Or are you one of Ethan's mates from... Ethan studied over in China in an international school, so I know a lot of his mates are kind of spread all over the world. So if you come across any art online which you think is brilliant and you can go and check out, please do share it. So yeah, so that's what we're going to do today. Excuse my coughing, by the way. I'm going to take a little slip of my coffee. Those know me, I was on my coffee. I am sponsored this week by myself. I don't know if you can see that. This is a group of manimal drawings. There was portraits of my partner Andrea. I'm sure she'll be pleased with me. I'm showing you this cup. And I saw a thing online where you could put your art on a cup, and I kind of used all 4 of her images, her manimal portraits, put them on my cup. So that's what the cover is today. Certainly my go-juice for this morning. That'll keep me going. So back into the artwork straight away. So very similar to how I often start off, is to find my location in the page. I was thinking about sort of darkening the image down, but on this particular image it's quite dark in one corner and light in the other corner, so I wanted to keep the light of the page, and I will build up the darknesses in a certain area. He worked incredibly quickly when he worked through his portraits, and his observation was measured by, he did a thing called sight size, and so they were literally sat beside where his canvas was, or his paper was, and he would study where they were, look to where his hand was on the page, and before he made the mark, make sure he knew where he's putting his mark. Now, the funny thing is, when looking at the different portraits through the book, it regaled some insight into his process, because these portraits are in sort of family's collections still, so when they put the book together, they were going around and seeing if they could find all of these portraits, and they got extra information from the families who now are the custodians of the artworks, of little notes and things, entries into their diary about how they felt about the sitting, whether they thought it was a good portrait of them, and did he capture their likeness and things like that. So it's quite interesting to hear it. And one of the comments was, when he was drawing, he didn't always make the right mark, and he would go, he used to call them demons. He would be drawing away and go, you demons at me again, and he would rub them out and stand back and make another little mark. And it was a comment that was made by one of the sitters. I thought it was quite funny that we often see an artist like Sargent, one of the great and good artists out there, who you think are, they never did anything wrong. But it's nice to hear that he was human. He wasn't an autonomous photocopying machine of beautiful portraits, that he was really considering what he was doing at the time, and sometimes it didn't work. And he had to kind of rework areas, and In some of the portraits in the book, you can really see areas of kind of refinement where he's overworked one area because it wasn't quite right, and he's put some extra work into it. But the ghost of the image is still there, and it doesn't take away from the portrait. It actually adds a little bit to it because it gives you the structure and the life behind all of the marks he made, and certainly the life of the sitters. I'm saying this, you can disagree if you like, but the life of the sitters seemed to really come out. They really seem like they are real people rather than, overly classical, stylized portraits. They actually feel human, if you like, and I quite like that about his portraiture, that they do look like they are people that really exist. Sometimes when you see very sort of I would say public image portraits, say portraits of a chairman of the board, or of a king. Their portraits tend to be about something else. It's not getting the personality of the sitter; it's getting their status of the sitter, and that's what they're really trying to project. It's almost like an overly apt photograph on Instagram where the person is kind of lost through filters of kind of a overlay of status, and you lose who the person is, and sometimes they don't want you to see that side of them. And I think with Sargent, he captured something of the sitter, and that is to me it's a mark of a really interesting portrait. When you go past the quality of the drawing and the element of the medium and how they manipulate the medium, and you look at the portrait and go, who is that person? And you can almost see the thoughts that are whizzing through their head, the sensitivity of the person, things like that. So I'm a bit of a fan of Sargent. No, it's not to say I like everything that he's done, but there's certain elements to his drawing style which kind of certainly sing to me, and I can't say that I'm going to do a perfect reproduction of a Sargent picture. But what I do want to do is try and take the elements that I can see in it and I like in it, pull those out. If that makes sense. What else we got up there? Alex, hello, how are you? Oh, Scully's a friend of yours from Australia. Oh, cool. I think you're in your summertime. I hope you're having a nice one. I love the fact that the internet can bring people from around the world together. We do slag off social media and all the rest of it. It's negative connotations, but there are some great benefits as well, which we sometimes easily overlook. So all I'm doing here at the minute, you can sort of see a little bit of a ghost image starting to appear now of where things are. I'm using my eye to kind of measure out planes, and I am literally just drawing in straighter lines, and I'm kind of manipulating the image. Now I can start to see that it's starting to feel a little bit wide. I'm going to block in loosely where the hair comes in, because the hair kind of comes down this direction and then follows down to the chin, about there. And where the head was that wide before, my chin was about here. It made the face look too big, and what I actually had to do was just drop that chin down a little bit to get the length of the head in. So I can make a little tiny mark there at the bottom of the chin. I can get that rough angle in of where the chin is coming out. This chin actually follows through into this hairline quite nicely. There's areas that you can't quite see, like the back of a head. You especially can't see them on your picture because that's cut off by the book. But there's a little more hair there. There's a highlight that comes down, which is just in your frame, and there's a section just beside the head. So we can, rather than looking at hair, because often a question people ask is, how do you draw hair? And I never draw individual follicles, and if you have a look at his pictures, there are very few individual hair strands. He's gestured at a couple just to refine certain areas, say that little tiny quiff over a forehead. The rest is quite blocky, and that's what I'm going to attempt here. I'm not going to draw in individual strands. What I'm going to draw is the shapes of those blocks into my picture, looking at the sweep down and how these things kind of relate to each other, making associations with where that curl comes out there is in line with this bit here, and it curls back up, and it comes back up that way. So there's lots of kind of readjustment and playing around and moving shapes around at this stage. We're not trying to be so perfect straight away. Now with Sargent, he was a little bit more considered about his mark making. I'm kind of an artist that sort of sculpts my way through a painting or a drawing. I move around a lot. I move images around. So I always suggest to people, go and have a look to see how other artists work, because we might all be taught a certain basic at some stage throughout our school life, throughout our university education if we go that route, throughout our academy training if we go through that route. We're all taught a version of a way to do things, but through the process of actually doing it, you'll keep adding different ways of either seeing things or producing artwork or manipulating mediums. You'll do that naturally. You'll find your own little route, and so over a period of time, to me, that's what will develop what people kind of rush a little bit too early in, I think, into finding your style. Styles develop. They don't necessarily get kind of applied to your artwork. You can't go, oh, well, I'll take Andy Warhol's style, I will put it on my artwork and now it will look like an Andy Warhol. You might be influenced by Andy Warhol, and you might take some of his printing processes, but through doing them you will naturally tweak them and they will naturally become your style. You can be influenced by different artists. For example, I might be influenced by Sargent today. I might be influenced by Jenny Saville tomorrow when I'm painting. I might be influenced by lots of different artists and put them all together. You can take these influences, the strengths of their art, and pull out what makes sense to you or what's interesting to you, put them in your own mixer, add your own little flavour to it, and then start to create your artwork. And a great way of say studying art is to do these copies. When you start to look at the subtlety in lighting and shading and how he might have used mediums to create the illusion of a fine shadow that pulls across the face, say with his cheek, he's used on his page some cross hatching. Now I might just say, okay, I might use that and add a little bit of flavour of toning the paper as well, just to emphasize a little bit. So work it out, have a play with it. Don't be too controlling. You've got to kind of have a go. If it's got to fail a couple of times, you kind of try things out, that doesn't work, but I kind of like the marks, but I don't like the overall image, or I like how that bit worked but not how this bit worked. When you're kind of playing around with your techniques, that's what will start to infuse your artwork, the things that you want to create for yourself. So working in sketchbooks is a great way of doing it as well. I've been working on a few sketchbooks. If you look through my Instagram page, there's been a couple of pencil portraits. I was just working through the book and turning over the page and going, I really like that image. Who's this person? Okay, I really like that person as well. I'll do this image. There's people in the book I'm kind of going, well, I don't want to draw him because either the personality behind it didn't kind of sing to me. So I'm kind of constantly searching for images and visual stimulus that speaks to me. Alex, you're thinking about styles. Is there a sort of style for impatient people like me where you can get a likeness quickly? Yes, but it takes practice. And what I'll say is, when you look at caricaturists, and I'm not saying that you want to do a caricature, that you want to do something which is a slimmed down version of a very recognizable person. You're going to leave information out and you put information in. Another good bunch of artists to look at are actually animators, because they will refine down to some very basics the essence of the portrait, the essence of the person. And it reminds me of Disney. You can see it on YouTube. There's a picture, Andrea will laugh at this, because there's a little video clip of a woman who is dressed like Cinderella and she's dancing around, and they have all of these artists quickly just sketching down her movement, and they're looking for the flow of the dress and the positioning of hands and the flow of hair when she twirls around and things. The funny thing is, it does actually look like Andrea. We saw it, and this is a film from the 1930s, 40s or 50s maybe. But these animators are literally just quickly sketching down the basics of it. So not trying to go into too much detail, but to look at the forms and the shapes, and looking at light and how do you render light, rather than necessarily getting the perfect representation of, say, light to dark. They might do something very similar to what Sargent's done in the background here, and he's just quickly done that in the background. Once he's found the form, he's put the background in very basically, because that's good. He doesn't want to put out too much emphasis on that. He could have spent time really controlling the background, keeping it really dense and really picking out some of his finer marks. But that's not what this portrait is about. These finer marks come in some of the more refined details of the face. And the other elements of this portrait, are gestures. They're impressions of material of her dress. They're impressions of pearls that drop over her shoulder. But those pearls that drop over her shoulder follow the form of her body. They capture little bits of shadow. They're not perfectly drawn. The material itself is just suggested. They're quite abstract shapes really, but there's enough information in there to give you the sense of, oh, that's part of her shawl that sits over her shoulder. Similar thing with the hair. So yeah, there is. That's a very long way of answering that question. But yeah, go and check them out. Have a look at some of the impressionist artists when you're looking at let's see, Manet, Renoir, like some of the big names you can kind of look at. But there are like thousands of artists like that who are around today. Have a search through Instagram. Have a search through that hashtag MyPAOTW, My Portrait Artist of the Week, over on Instagram, and flick through. There is 34,000 of them. Don't think you maybe have that much time, but flick through and just see if there's a simplicity in the execution of a portrait that you like. Have a look at that artist, see if they're doing any more, see if they're doing any classes online. Some of them are, like myself, professional, semi-professional artists who will do a live podcast about how they draw. You can send them a little message of support that might encourage them. They might start a conversation up with you about what type of things they looked at or artists that they like. So that level of conversation can really develop. Your research can really help you find more people to look at, if you like. I'm trying to think of somebody else you could look at. Certainly Sargent, to have a look at him, because these were done in a couple of hours, which is not that long really. If you're looking for a quick 5-minute sketch, go and have a look at animators, definitely, because they will break things down very quickly, because the speed of their business is producing lots and lots and lots of variations and changes of characters and things like that. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about Disney cartoons, but some of the Ethan, you probably able to give me a heads up on some of these artists. The computer games industry, where they're animated of figures or people's faces, and these guys are going to atelier artists because they break it down to simple shapes. So for example, they would literally go, there's a face, going to put the eyes here, I'm going to move this eyebrow up here, don't like that one, I'll turn the page over and I'll do another one, and go, oh, okay, try another one, I'll do it with a wider mouth, I'll try another one, I'll try to do it with a bigger nose, I'll try another one, and they constantly produce lots of work, but variations, but they're quite clinical in the way they think. They might be looking for a flow or a line or a gesture to give a physicality to a form, or we were looking at this, how long her neck is. I think he's almost elongated the illusion of her neck. When you look at this, she's got a head kind of twisted, kind of looking out just off to my right hand side. It's elongated her neck, which reminds me of Modigliani used to do that as well, but his inspiration was from African tribal masks, where the face was quite long and the neck was quite slender, and it was quite stylized. Definitely an influence from sort of African art. I'm going to have a look at this line just coming down here. I'm just going to put a simple line in for the moment, just so I get a sense of if this line comes out to here, how far that away is from this part of that kind of floret or twisted material here, and it comes straight down here and then across here a little bit straighter. And what I'm doing is looking at the negative shape. I'm looking at this kind of shape and the space in between these two things, just so I can start to pull my right hand side of my drawing to my left hand side of the drawing. I can start to see how far this neck line actually comes down. Mine's come down way too far, I think. And if that's the neck there, the other shoulder we can see is in the shadow. It's about there, but that's where that shadow ends. I've got mine ending there. It only ends there, just to help me out. I might just take that little bit back out if I've gone down too far. As I say, I'm working quite lightly, so this moves around quite a bit. With environmental art, consideration needs to be given to game settings, location in the game world, political, religious influences, and the game's culture. Yeah. This is all about character design. Same goes for character design. Apart from the character design, is the small details add to the character's personality because we're making them, and it's very similar to portraiture. There's a very big similarity to a character design and the observation of somebody, and the elements that you choose to pull out from your observations and put into your portrait to tell you that it's this person. So if we're looking for accuracy, we need to consider proportions of that person and where they are and how they're sitting. If you ever wanted to over accentuate something, you might look at her eyebrows because they're quite heavy and quite sculpted. There's lovely elements to them as a shape. If you wanted to emphasize that, you could certainly play around with it. But there's a good way of finding out where the location of our actual eyes are, because where this ends here on the left hand side of her eye, you go straight across and you hit the corner of her eye there, it almost tells you where the location of her eyes are. If you then follow that through, so you can hold your pencil on the image and move it back to your page, you'll get the axis of the eyes. Now this just happens to be in a straight axis. There's a slight tilt down to this eye on the right side because it's curving away from you. One of the things to remember when you're doing portraits in people's faces, they're not a page. You're trying to recreate the illusion of a face that is actually in 3 dimensions. It's in space. It goes around. So you've got to think about that when you're doing it. We often do portraiture in the classroom where you break down proportions and it looks very mask-like. You draw a line down the middle, eyes go in the middle of the head, between the top of the head and the bottom of the chin. The nose goes between the eyes and the chin. Mouth goes between the nose and the chin in the middle. And you kind of break it down into all these sections. Problem is, when you're drawing somebody from life, or you're drawing somebody's character, if they have their head tilted, think about, for example, Lady Diana. She would often have her head tilted down like that, and it would change the proportions. And what would often happen is, because that kind of proportion set is hardwired into us about how the eyes are halfway down the head, if we've got somebody's head positioned like that, we tend to still stick to that rule, and it doesn't quite fit. And often kind of you get that very square, flat on portrait stuck on somebody's head which is slightly angled, and it looks weird, and it happens subconsciously. Our brain is hardwired into ordering things and putting things in its order, in a straight, easily accessible information visually. So when we're recalling that information, it will try and straighten everything back out for you. You know, you'll move Lily down his head from being like that to being like that, and she'll be looking straight at you. So it's just interesting. Something I've noticed certainly in the classroom environment, where it's one of the first things where you go, what is the direction of the person's head? And they'll go, oh, it's like that. And go, just look at your page, which is yours direction? And they'll go, oh, mine's straight. And you go, yeah, all we need to do is just shift it, tilt it. So yeah, keep an eye out for those things. The basic form and figure about where their heads are, proportions. Proportions often help you get the likeness, believe it or not. It's great you're having a conversation. Good. I love it in the chat bar because I get to see what everybody's writing. That, you know, have a conversation between yourself. It doesn't have to always include me. I might jump in on it occasionally. But yeah, Ethan, you can answer Alex's question. I know his name's Waldorf on there, but his name's Alex. He's a very nice man. So I can now see that on my page, her nose is further over this side, and in the positioning of that end of her nose is about there. I'm just putting the basic lines of where I can see things at the moment, and her mouth is slightly longer on this side than it is on that side because she's got her head slightly turned, so it's going to be shorter on this side because obviously when you turn your head away we'll see more of this side of her face. But it just helped me find out the location of these lines. So the top of her top lip and the line of her mouth. These things might move around still. That's the underside of her lip. It looks very abstract at the minute, you know, that you don't see the likeness, but as we start to build these marks up, I don't then have to worry about locations of things because it will already be there for me. I know that I put this mark in for the bridge of a nose, and it's not, it's actually further over to the right hand side, so I'm going to do that now. And then that means where this eye comes out is around about there for the top of the eye, and then it comes down this direction, and there's a nice space between the edge of her eye and the edge of her cheek there. And this line where I've got it stopping here before it changes to her cheek comes down past her eye, comes down here, and then cuts in this way. So it's the subtle changes that you start to notice as you start to look more. You start to see more changes of the angles of things, put them in, like, you know, if you're building it up lightly, they're easy to start to map in. When we get into more of the filling out, you don't have to worry so much about positioning of where things are. It takes away that fear and worry about mucking it up because you're going to put it in the wrong place. You already know where it's going to go because you've put some of these guiding marks in it. You know, they can figure out what the size of the eye is in relationship to the head, in relationship to the nose. You see this shadow and how I put this mark in very lightly because there's no line here, but it gives me an access of where this line comes down. Just such a subtle highlight there, and then where the arc of that nostril goes, and from the filtrum, which is the bit just underneath the nostril. So I don't have to worry about it too much. It is quite angular to begin with. Oh, you've got somebody from India. Cool. Prajawal, you've been with us before. It's good to see you again. The base is looking so good. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Just catching up on what you have in conversation about. 3D artists to do modelling programs and reconstructing to do art blocking characters and shape and sculpting it out. There's a guy called Proco on YouTube, well worth having a look at. He does an awful lot of animation, and he works through lots of different processes about how to capture when I say animation, I don't mean the cartoon character, but I mean actually how you animate somebody. You know, if you're making them look expressive. You think about the old comics about Spider-Man and things like that, how they would look dynamic and how they would move and things like that, and the basic physicality of people and how they move, what muscles would do certain things, how necks might twist and what you might see and things like that. Well worth checking out. Proko, Proco. Well worth checking out. As I say, I'm quite open to lots of different influences from lots of different art genres. You know, I'm not too bothered if, you know, my source of inspiration is coming from somewhere that might be deemed by lots of other artists as being a bit commercial. But I don't mind. I'm looking at the visual content. You know, what inspires me visually. You know, that's what's important. I think when you're drawing or you're starting off with your art, don't get sucked into the fashionista of art. You know, what is the latest good stuff? You know, yes, be inspired by what's around you and what is current, but where things hit kind of fashion or trends and things like that, I try to look past trends and try and see the art that looks interesting to me. And sometimes, 9 times out of 10, when I'm looking at something, it's nothing to do with the trend, it's to do with the quality of the art, or the quality of the images. You tried something called ZBrush, which created a model from font size at the top sound image. Oh, okay, cool. So look at her shoulder. There is a little bit of shoulder which comes out over here, which you can just see. It's off your page. Now it's a little bit above this line of this shoulder because this is a shadow. This is all in shadow up here, and the shadow kind of comes out of the neck off to the right hand side, which is a bit of this dress. It looks like a little bit of sort of taffeta kind of wrapped around her. As a very theatrical, dramatic. It might be just an artistic flair that he's put in himself, or he may have sort of dressed her in this kind of very flamboyant, flowy material, very opulent and rich looking. You know, you've got to think about material would have cost a lot of money, and to have a seamstress create something for you would show your wealth. Not everybody had material to waste like this. You know, it also shows status. All of these things are quite subtle, which you don't really think about. The portraits of the day, people go, oh, these are amazing. Look at the pearls she's got on. You know, that shows her wealth as well. But she's not ostentatious with it. She's got no other jewellery on. She's not wearing big diamond rings or anything. There's a confidence and a certainty about her that I get from the portrait. I don't know what you see. It'd be interesting to see what if you were to describe what she was like. And it is totally subjective, it's just your gut instinct. What would it be? It'd be interesting to see your comments actually. So what do you see in her as a person? If you were to just see this person walking down the street, what would you think of them? And you can be honest. And it's interesting to hear different other people's points of view of what, you know, portraits are all about, or how they kind of appeal to people or not appeal to people, because it gives you a good insight into us as people. I think our own prejudices. We can have prejudices which are just based socially, not just racially or culturally. It could be what you have an affinity to can be your prejudice. Like-minded people might be all very creative, so you might be attracted to creative environments or the bohemian lifestyle. That might be the thing that really interests you. It doesn't necessarily have your predilection or what your interests are can give you that prejudice. It's not just about the negativity of prejudice, and that's not what we're talking about. You see her vulnerability, and I think that's really interesting, because there's very little clothing on her, even though she's got a dress on, and there's a baring of the neck and shoulder and having her head up, which I get what you mean by her vulnerability in there. There's that kind of slight looking off to the right hand side has you put pensive at Alex. It's funny how our body language is so subtle, especially in our face, and how we carry our face and when we talk and how we express ourselves can give you so much information which is really subtle, and it's a gesture which we can be aware of as you're creating your portrait that might direct you into putting certain marks down to emphasize that. So her vulnerability be delicate, light application. Her pensiveness might be down to her body posture. She's got a chin up, she's kind of braced or something. Now I can see some different things, but it's great. She looks like she's thinking about something that happened in the past, like friends she's not contacted anymore. I mean, that's just a beautiful way of describing it. That's what's interesting about portraiture. It allows you to read up or project into a story of a person as well. I see a lightness to her face. There is almost, I don't want to say Mona Lisa smile, but there's a slight smile to her face. There's a wryness in her eyebrows where she's knowing. I see a bit more confidence in her. It's not to say that my perception of her is right and yours is wrong. It's just a different perception, and this is looking past the information I've got in the book. That will tell you what she was like as a person, but I think you'll never know 100% anyway, even from books like this. So when you read something into a portrait, it speaks back to you. It almost is like a mirror to you as well. I think it's interesting. So it's almost like a Rorschach test. When you get a link block test and somebody says, "What do you see?" I think portrait does that, because it allows you to tell a story that's in your head, and it allows you to engage creatively. And certainly when you're creating something, be aware of that. Don't try and shun it. To kind of embrace it and add it into your work. I'm sure at the time bearing a shoulder seemed very daring, showing an ankle, but I see very calm, confident lady. Cool. So very small changes to the eye position and mouth. She could look quite different in mood. Yeah, totally. You got to think about it. If you can literally change at a glance. If I look up there, I'm not changing my face, but if I look up there and then change my eyes, it can change how you might read my face. So if I looked up, it might make me look a bit sort of, oh, I'm wondering about this, or what should I have for tea, or stuff like that. And then if I'm not moving my head, but I move my eyes, it gives you a different take. I'm a bit more contemplative. Am I thinking about something I should have done? A regret. So eye positioning is massive, because we communicate through our eyes. We communicate more through our body language and our physical being more than we do without our actual words. Andrea watches a lot of like crime programs and things like that, where they interview criminals. They will have them on camera, and they're being interviewed by the police, and there are tells, and they can't mask them. And you can kind of look at them, and they're saying one thing, and you know that they are lying, and they've done something else because they can't physically hide what's in their head, and it comes out in their face. And it's obviously the police have to go and find evidence and stuff and go through the procedure that way, but you can get a gesture where you kind of go, I don't get a sense of truth from that person because of the way they're sitting. And that little tiny element of observation is important to when you are doing your portraits. Not that you do portraits of criminals, but what I mean is, the people you do the portraits of, who are they to you? Who is the portrait really for? If it's for a company because they want to show off the chairman, you're not wanting necessarily to do replication of that person as the jovial, nice guy at home playing with his grandkids. He might, or a very authoritative, in control lady. You don't get to see the kind generosity that she looks after her elderly relatives, or if it's corporate, it's something different. It's away from the personality of the person. So it depends on who you're doing the portrait for and who of. What is it you're trying to say about them? So have that in your head. What is it you're trying to say? If you have found that you're starting to do things and it's starting to make them look too sad or too happy, be aware of what you can do to change. Maybe, I want them to have a little bit more wistfulness to them, a little bit more contemplative look. Then I might get them to look away and up. Do you see what I mean? If I sit there and go, I'm trying to access something in my memory, I'm looking up into my memory, to my mind's eye, to be elsewhere than right here in front of you doing the portrait. I'm thinking about something else, and that's something that you might want to capture. So you can tweak things a little bit. You can change eye positions, you can change eyebrows, and I've got very expressive eyebrows. I can't see particularly well without my glasses, and I squint an awful lot, but I found that my squinty face can be quite off-putting to people, where they think I'm really, really angry. No. But because I haven't got my glasses on, I'm squinting, and I end up looking like sort of like Clint Eastwood. Go ahead, punk, make my day. But that's not what's going on in my head. Anybody who knows me knows the difference between those two looks. If I am angry about something, my face is different. So the more time you spend with people and looking at them, the more you can see the subtlety, and the more you can bring that out into your artwork. Actors are great at skillful at conveying things, and I would say, definitely look at actors who do that really well. Who don't have to say very much on screen, don't have to perform show tunes, don't have to perform something to get across their intent. They're doing it with their eyes, they're doing it with their quietness, and that's really interesting. So a bit of research might be, you just sit with movies and watch how people move. Look at old black and white movies where they couldn't move the camera around so much and they didn't want people jumping all over the place, and actors from old school black and white movies had to give a lot of energy and emotion through their face. Now some of it is a bit ham when you look at it, people go like that. There's other actresses and actors you kind of look at, and it's so subtle. Aidan said he got the squint from me. Yeah, you did. I got mine from Grandad. Your Grandad, not my Grandad. So this kind of like squint, quizzical kind of glare. It might be a family trait. Sorry about that. It's genetics. Nothing you can do about it. I'm really glad to get back to doing this. I found, I enjoyed Christmas, but being away from doing this, I was kind of missing something. Getting back to do this is such a treat. So, and I'm not just being sycophantic. I really do get a pleasure out of doing these online things, because it's a great excuse to just communicate with people again and talk about art. Because I'm very, very lucky, because I've got somebody who's very supportive in what I do. We have long conversations about art and watch different art programs and things. Having this conversation with you, even if it's just text on the screen at the moment, is a joy. So thank you for being here with us. The other thing, if you notice as well, my head down in the bottom left hand corner, my little tiny mini me portrait, you watch my head go like that an awful lot. It's because I'm looking at the page and the drawing and the page and the drawing and the page and the drawing. Observation is vital to portraiture because of all of those subtleties that we've just talked about. You need to see them first and to capture them into your artwork. It takes you to look and to see where things actually are, where you don't guess where a nose, a mouth or an eye are, but you look at the forms of shadow and you look at the shape and space of where things are away from each other, and okay, I might need to move this shadow back a little bit, and where this chin comes out here now comes down this way, because I'm looking at the page and I can see the distance. The mark I've made here might be too low and it might need to come up a little bit. I might be there, which means I get that area of where the mouth is. I can see where this part of the hairline comes down this way a little bit more, and I can see where the shadow underneath her chin comes out. I'm quite happy with where the bottom of the chin is. There's a shadow that comes out almost at the left hand side of her chin. There's a shadow shape that comes down really sort of well. I'll put it in maybe a little bit too heavy there. It kinks back out again. There's a shadow which kind of breaks this side of her chin. It kind of comes in a little bit, but this kind of comes under it. And on the same side here, there's a little bit of a shadow change there. There's a line just above the eye going off in that, maybe that direction. So all of these little marks and things, I'm not trying to draw the perfect eye. That I can refine later on. But I'm starting to get the feeling of where things are. See how her mouth, if that's the middle of her mouth, that is shorter than that side because her head is turned away, which means that this curves in a little bit more. As this curves in a little bit more, where I've got this neck joining up here, it doesn't, it joins in here. If I'm looking at the angle of my mouth to where her neck starts coming down. And you can see now, if the neck's moved in a little bit from this line I've had, it's thinned her neck out a little bit. I think I've got too much of a bend going in here. I think that's straighter there. There's a hint of a shadow that is below her nose, about there, which gives me this cheek up here, which means this eyebrow comes down a little bit more. So you can see how this portrait and how the observations really help you kind of position things out a little bit. I'm looking at where I had this hair out over here originally. This highlight that you can see on your screen, it comes down this direction. This large highlight though, it kind of cuts in on itself. And like an M. There's no other way to explain it. It's like an M of dark shadow coming out there, and then a bit of shadow there. There's a gap here to where the ear is. Ear is about there. No, it should be in line with the nose. So it gives you a sense of where a nose is, and where that shadow then comes out. So if these things are relating to each other, if you go straight across and I get the bottom of her ear, the bottom of her ear should be there. You see what I mean? If I'm just randomly sticking an ear in, you know, just to go, oh wow, I need two ears. Where could I put the ear? Again, if you go back to where you think about it, if you look straight on, the top of the ear comes to where the eyebrow is, and the bottom of the ear comes to where the bottom of the nose is. Because we're looking at it from this side, the bottom of her ear is in line with the nose on that side, but on the other side, because you've got a head slightly turned away, because it's a curved space, her right ear is lower in this angle, and the right ear is about there. Now, if you used to go, oh, comes to where the bottom of the nose is, and you just kept with the basic proportions of what's hardwired in your head, you would put the ear in the wrong place. And you would lose that emphasis of her head's turned. So all these things are quite subtle and they can build up in the portrait. But if you kind of skip past them and don't look to see what is actually in front of you, or maybe a photographic reference or the sitter that is in front of you, and you just make assumptions where things are, you'll start to lose proportions and you'll start to lose perspective of how your sitter is actually sitting. You wish you could multitask, but don't think I could draw and listen and watch simultaneously, but then again it would be a surprise. Surprise your wife. Yeah, it's a skill you can build, because I don't think anybody is ever born with a natural talent to do that. I'm not very good at it. I've seen other people. If you watch Stephen Bauman draw, he's brilliant at drawing and talking at the same time. Really take my hat off to him. Other people just need to concentrate on their... I've seen people on Twitch, which is another platform that Ethan was talking about, who will just do their artwork and there'll be a live broadcast going on. They don't really converse, they're just doing their artwork. And occasionally when they take a break, they just turn around and have a bit of a chat, and then they get back to doing their work. And it's a bit hypnotic. You can stick it on and whilst you're working and work away doing your drawing, just turn around occasionally and see how what they're working on. It's almost like working in a studio with somebody else working, you know. Yeah, so multitasking, talking and drawing at the same time. I've certainly noticed that it slows my drawing down, and you know, I have to refine what I'm doing occasionally when I've made silly mistakes because I've not really been concentrating on what I've been doing. So it's a toughie, but it's doable. If you see any teachers online that you think are really good, again, share them with us, tell us who they are. Any other artists doing workshops or demonstrations. I'm always up to see how other artists work. I think it's a great joy of the modern age where you can actually share, you know, artists doing their process, because it adds so much interest into their artwork. Let me see. So I'm getting quite happy with roughly where these proportions are starting to sit. I think maybe my nose is a little bit too wide. Just looking at that. Yeah, might be right. I'm just trying to kind of imagine out where things were. So I was looking up from the right hand side of her nostril. If I go straight up, I should hit the corner of her eye, and I do hit the corner of her eye. So it might be that I've just not giving myself enough credit. We can certainly see the basic proportions starting to. I mean, again, one of the things you need to be aware of, because you're looking at this from a camera angle, which is coming at a different angle than I'm looking at it straight on. I'm looking at mine straight on this way, and you're looking at it from that way. So there's two different perspectives. This is straight to me, that's straight to you. These two different perspectives can slightly skew things a little bit. visually. So yeah, I think what I'm going to do now, I'm quite happy with the basics shape of things. I might just tweak this top of the head here, give it a basic form. Basic form of her hair comes down this way. You see her head disappears into the darkness in this point, so I'm not going to worry too much about with that side of her head. What is interesting as well, we've got these shapes that are appearing in the neck. I think it goes up a little bit. Yeah, the kind of all this material is still quite important to not necessarily get right in every single fold, but the basic shape of it is important because it gives you the form and shape of her body. And I think with me, I've got her body a little bit too small, that if this comes out to here and then comes down, that this whole floret thing that I had going on here is too high up. Yeah, that's better. It's just dropped down a little bit and moved off to the right a little bit, and it's just enough to give me space for this neck and for taking into consideration where her neck and shoulder break over what would be her trapezius muscle that goes over the top of the neck and then into her shoulder. And it's a very stylized shoulder. It's almost just a gesture of a line. It's anatomically, you kind of look at it and go, is it that kind of slopey? You know, if he added something else there to give it maybe a fashionable look of the day. You know how physical form in people has changed over periods of time. So if you look at Rubens' figures, they were quite robust, a fuller figure. Well, if you look back at the 60s, Twiggy model was waif-like and quite emaciated and thin. Fashion has kind of dictated what is popular, which is kind of what we're all becoming more aware of today, and how to look right isn't necessary to look one way anymore, which is great. You can be how you look, and you can be body confident, knowing that you don't have to conform to a certain stereotype. And I think that's what's interesting about modern society in that kind of fashion sense, that everything is in vogue at the minute. There's still certain stylizations even in modern culture, but it's culturally different wherever you go around the world. So it's not just one thing is right and everything else is wrong. So nobody has to appear like a Kardashian. You know, not everybody has to look like that. Not everybody has to look like David Beckham or Brad Pitt. You know, there's lots of different things to look at. You're working on a portrait of your dad, and was listening to this and chatting, and just love the mix of all three. Cool. You know, I love that. I love the fact that you guys are working on your thing. If you get stuck or you have a problem with your work, or you're not too sure what to do and you need some advice on that, don't hesitate. You can message me on my Facebook page. You can send me a clip. I can have a look at it and I can give you my take on it. You don't have to take my advice. It's not a teacher dictating to you what you should and shouldn't do. It's just a take. Be confident in what you do. You know, adjust and move, and it's okay to change things around and turn over the page, start again. If things are working for you, get enthused by it. You know, do enjoy it. You are allowed to enjoy what you do. It shouldn't be a fight and a struggle. But yeah, I love the fact that you're working away as well. Modern area. If Michael's still with us, you're working on a portrait of Prince. Don't know if are you still working on that? I saw Prince twice. Once with one of my mates from England before I left to go to university in Northern Ireland. We went down to Birmingham to see him, and then once when I came up to Northern Ireland, I saw him down in Dublin, which was really interesting because he it's called the Diamonds and Pearls Tour, and it was 6 hours of live music because who was it? Curtis Steiger was the first guy that played, which I was like, that wasn't that first one, Curtis Steiger. But the other one was Andrew Strong from the Commitments at the time when the Commitments had come out, and he did a gig, and because it was down in Dublin, it was huge, it was immense, and it was such a good gig. And then Prince came out and played like his 2.5 hour set flawlessly. That was amazing to see. When you watch some really good musicians, that's impressive. We've been lucky to see some really good gigs over the year. It's one thing that we were chatting about last night. We really miss seeing live music, but we had a couple of friends. I'll give them a shout as well, called the Foyer Incident. I wonder if I can get their page up. There are a couple that we know, and they do a lot of covers, and they're brilliant crack, really good fun. And they were doing live from the lounge, live from their living room, on a Friday, and they would literally play a couple of hours and chat, and a lot of people that we know would be all on there chatting away on Facebook, and you can sing along to some of the songs. Really, really good. A lot bit of fun. So I am actually going to see if I can just quickly find them on Facebook and give them a little bit of a shout out. So type in the Foyer Incident. There we are. I'll find the link and share that. There we are. Copy that and paste that up in the chat for us. There. There we are. Foyer Incident. Come to do a gig now and again on a Friday. Go to the page, give it a like. It'll come up on your notifications on Facebook. But yes, good laugh. Couple of hours on like seeing live music, real performed in real time, and when you can type in little messages, you get a bit of feedback. And they've got like a really big following. They were saying that it's funny because what people on the night, and a bit like this, where maybe sort of 6 of us watching in the room now, chatting with each other, which is not an awful lot, but it's a nice little group. What you find is over the week, a lot more people have watched it, and it gets shared around further and different things. So people are sharing it on Facebook and get spread around that way, and it won't necessarily show in the figures on YouTube. And through the week that builds, and over the weeks it builds even further. So more and more people see it, but the same thing happened to them with their gigs as well. So yeah, they've got like a few thousand people are watching it. Whereas they'll be playing, say, one of the local bars here in Northern Ireland called Jenny Watts. It might be a couple of hundred people in the bar, and now they're reaching a couple of thousand people, and it completely blows the mind. But yeah, really bit of fun. So yeah, if you've got any bands and stuff you've seen online that do regular gigs, let us know. Yes, you still drawing Prince, Michael, right now, playing with brushy and charcoal and dust, enjoying the art chat. Cool. It's funny when you're drawing somebody who people really love, like Prince or David Bowie and Bob Marley and things like that. There's a real interest in the artwork that's produced, and I would suggest when you've done it, post it up. Don't be scared of posting those images up on say places like Instagram, and put the hashtag Prince portrait or drawing, purple rain hashtag, or whatever it is. Link it, and you'll get to see sort of some feedback into the work. It'll get shared around an awful lot more. You might get start linked into other people doing similar artwork and similar portraits as well. And same for the portrait of the boxer that he did as well. It'll be interesting to sort of gauge what other people think of it. Give you that little bit of encouragement. Kathy, you said you were doing a picture of your dad. There's a real connection. I did a picture of my dad, was it last year, year before? And when you're sitting down observing somebody who's close to you, but you're observing it as a drawing. You start to see more of that person than you've ever noticed. I don't know if you're finding that, and little subtleties in their face that you start to recognise it of your own start coming in. So my furrowed eyebrow, my forehead, not eyebrow, my furrowed forehead, I started to see the closeness of that to my own. I started thinking back to my granddad, and he had it as well. You start to see these traits. So a bit like Ethan, you were talking about the squint. If you did a portrait of somebody you really know well, you start to see even more into the portrait as well. It's really, really interesting. Alex, Lee, Michael, anyone in charcoal pan could make it go really dark. Yeah, pan pastel. This pan pastel is a really dark application. I'm actually going to flip over to that because I'm quite happy where things are right now. So I'm actually going to go to pan pastel just to fill out some of this black background. It's basically a compressed pastel in these little pancakes. Don't know if that's when you see that. Let me see that better. I've got it so dead. I can't do this. It's all back to front. There we are. Pan pastel. That's the brand. They're about £7 or £8 each, but you can go an awful lot with very little. I've got these applicators, which are. It looks like eyeshadow, but it's a nice pastel which is compressed. You can get these applicators. I'll put links up to this stuff as well in the show notes after I've finished. But I've got like these sort of spongy covers. This one just happens to be a pointed one. I quite like the pointed one because you can get sort of nice sharp edges, little tiny detail, and large coverage. So it's quite a versatile shape, but you can get different shapes in them as well. Yeah, there's about 3 drawings up on Instagram, enjoying linking to great artists from different styles. Cool. You definitely notice more. Quite nervous about getting it right on my second portrait. Yeah, my biggest bit of advice: let the fear go. Don't worry. It's a drawing. Your passion and drive to get things right is great, and carry that on through. But don't let an error trip you up. There's been loads of errors in this one. And there's loads of errors in nearly every portrait that I do, and it's how you build the confidence into dealing with them, and how you can how you can see what's not quite right and effectively change it, to manipulate it and move it, and if it's too low, move it up. Don't go, oh, it'll do, nobody will notice. Or if it's something later on that you hadn't noticed before, you rub it out and go back to layer it back in. If you're drawing lightly and building it up, you won't have that issue, because I'm only going in now when I know I'm happy with the placement where everything is. But I've still got enough flexibility in this drawing to refine it if I need to. So yeah, don't let the fear trip you up of getting it wrong. So what? If you get it wrong? You can get it right. You can change it. You can move it. You can allow yourself to make a mistake. Whoops! And that was a genuine mistake. I mean, I just bang on cue. I just accidentally tapped it where her cheek was, which is supposed to be pure white. I'm not going to rub it in. I'm going to take away some of the excess of that mark. I'm going to grab hold of my rubber and deal with it as I made it and make it go away. So yeah, that's a demonstration for you. But where that is quite light, obviously can't have that mark there. There's a subtlety with this side of her face. You can see how I'm changing and manipulating the shape of my edge. I'm using my point to get into that little nook of that shadow and draw that up, because it's dark. I know that it's thinner here and widens when it comes round. but I really want to put this dark area in, so that's what we're doing now. So to answer your question, Alex, this is the pan pastel. Is a type of paper relevant to dark pan pastel? You can work on grey paper, mid-tone grey, because it helps you find the lights and the darks, and you can add white chalk to it to bring that extra highlight out. I'm just using a heavyweight paper, and what's great about the heavyweight paper, because it's such a versatile paper, this heavyweight paper that I've got, you can get one from Winsor & Newton, and there's one by De La Rowney. You can use more expensive papers like Stonehenge, but they take pastel really well because it has got a little bit of grain to the paper of it. It's still smooth, but it still takes pastel and charcoal very well. If you're going to do solely pastels, there are pastel papers you can get, which are a bit like sandpaper or velour, and they kind of hold the layers of pastel, especially for colour. They hold layers of it a lot better. Takes you a bit of getting used to. I still don't personally like it, but this is a personal thing. There's other artists who work on it beautifully. Really good artist called Emma Colbert, who does a lot of animal portraiture, based over here in Northern Ireland, and she will use pastel paper quite an awful lot. I think she's even got a range of colours from a pastel company. Well worth checking out. So check out Emma Colbert. I'll see if I can find her Instagram in a page in a second. Give you a link to it. There's a lady as well, a painter called Jen Art. She does a lot of animal portraits as well, but she also paints people beautifully. And the quality of her work reminds me of Sargent, but she paints animals. And I was just looking at them this week, and it kind of just reminded me of the well-observed effortlessness in her mark making. Is beautiful to look at, and there's a very strong connection with what looks effortless, which is but well observed. So again, I don't necessarily draw solely just animals a lot. I draw manimals where I mix animal heads and people. It's a bit more of a conceptual thing. So I can understand the form of the animals that she does, but she does bring a humanity to them without making them look human. They've got a character and a life definitely a character to them, which comes out through her painting. So it's both well observed, but there's something else there that she's doing which is so subtle. Just looking at this shadow, maybe a little bit thinner there. Again, there's a lot of play with this time. It's quite painterly using pastels, I think. Oh, you meant the texture of the paper. Yeah, as I said, if you're using a lot of pastel paper, a lot of pastels, you can get a pastel paper, which is like a velour. It kind of got a sandpapery, velvety finish to it. But the texture of this cartridge paper, even though it's quite smooth, will take charcoal really well. But I think if you're building up lots and layers of colour with, say, pastels, that's where you'd find it might fall off. Now, I'm going to give the illusion of this streaky background. I'm going to go back over this with the compressed charcoal later, but just to give myself a grounding, just give myself a ground to work against. There was a portrait I did of Melanie Blatt during the Portrait Artist of the competition week, the week competition during COVID, which you might be able to see on my Instagram page, and I used pan pastel for that in the background. And this is just reminding me of it, where it was quite an abstract shaped background, but it gave you the impression that there was one of those low corner seat sofas and cushions and stuff, and I literally put it in with kind of straightish lines and blocks of shape and tone, and just blocked it in really quick, and it was really effective rather than trying to draw it all perfectly. Sometimes leaving a gesture of something is quite enough, because your detail of what it is you want people to concentrate on, like the face of the person that you're drawing, if that is more the thing that you want to be of focus, then all of these marks and things kind of disappear into the background anyway, and you just want to suggest them. So sometimes this abstract mark making is enough. So before I forget, I will do Emma Colbert. I'll find this out for you. There it is. Okay, here's Emma's Instagram pages. Right. So it takes me a little bit of a while to go through. I've got so many tabs open on my screen now. So there is Emma's, and the other one was Gen Art, wasn't it? Something for you to look at. You don't have to if you don't want to, but just makes context for what I'm talking about. Right, this is Gen Art. There we go. So you can check them out as well. But if you're looking at pastels, definitely check Emma Colbert. I think she's done some workshops online as well. You might want to check out. Before I'm going to do this, I've just noticed there's one of the lines that I've had left in my portrait. I think this line is still straighter than the curve that I have built in. I think it's softer when it comes on there, so I'm actually going to rub this back a bit and take that line out before I start to put the subtle shade on top. If you've got any lines in your work before you get into the rendering of anything, if you've got lines that are too heavy, what I kind of suggest is once you've got this kind of line area down, I've left mine in so you can see it because the way the light works with cameras, if I rub them back to as fine as I would normally work, you wouldn't see them at all. So I have to make them a little bit heavy for the camera to pick them up. But what I would normally do is go over this whole thing and rub them back so they're barely visible, but just enough so I know where things are. My markers are still there. If I'm doing something that's slightly more expressive, I sometimes just leave them there and allow the drawing to develop on top of them, so it adds that constructed element to it. like I was talking about earlier on with some of the areas of development in Sargent's drawings, where he's actually just left some of the lines in, and it's quite nice to see that still. Just going to colour this whole page in. All of this has some sort of tone in it, so even this hair. I've got some various pastels disappeared. It can look a bit rough and chunky at this point, and I don't get too concerned about it, because you can refine this as you go along. I'm putting some of the darks down in the right place because I've got everything kind of located. It looks a bit rough and ready around the edges, but I can play with that. I can lift it off and I can add more on. I can add more refinement with just sharper pencils and things. Where things are tonally darker, I can put that back in. And it's quite, as I said, this process is quite sculptural. You can see the subtlety and lightness of that shadow that goes around underneath her chin. Again, there's a bit of an error. I just drew on it. I'll take that back out. You know, I can brush on. I can use cotton wool ball to lift and pull some of this shadow out of the shadows underneath here and put underneath the chin. Now, rather than scrubbing, I'm just lightly moving I'm using a cotton wool ball for this, to pull underneath her chin. I can refine that mark now underneath her chin and darken this area down. If I have got areas where I've gone over the edge of her cheek, because I've applied it lightly in the pastel, I can sculpt this around so a little bit, so if I take too much off, I can add some more back on. So there's flexibility built in within this process. Lee mentioned that you will be using compressed charcoal. Is that to get a different effect? Yeah, it's to get a different quality of mark making. So where I quickly brushed in this whole area of marks on the back, this is an old scrubbing brush. You see that old scrubbing brush with a spongy bit on the back? I'm actually going to use that to blend this background in, because so you can see there's a slight difference between. Let's wait for my video to catch up. You're about a couple of seconds behind me on the video to me talking, so I'll wait for me to get caught up just so I can see the effect on the screen to make sure it makes sense for you. Yeah, you can see now we're starting to work the compressed charcoal onto the surface and add some of the qualities of the marks in Sargent's actual work, because there's a lovely soft quality to the face and the drawing. There's a lovely light linear, it is a slightly different quality feeling to the background. I'm going to go over with my spongy brush again. There's elements, say, you know, some of the expressive marks that are in the Fulton material. A wonderful triangle just about there, which I just want to put in. I can do that with, you know, one of the other ones. There's a mark which goes straight from where the pearls go out of her shoulder, about there, out that way. Just giving that, it's a different quality of texture which I quite like, and I can build that back up as we push this in and then go back over it again. It just adds a richer layer to it. Slight greyiness, the compressed charcoal, slightly different feeling. As it gets lighter to this right hand side, I'm kind of using the charcoal and page to pull it across onto the white. So rather than adding charcoal to this with a tool, I'm using the charcoal from this and pushing it and dragging it across with a sponge over to the right hand side, because the white isn't white. You do get lots of kind of drifty marks. I'm actually going to give it a slight coat over the entirety of her body. Even though this is white, it's got a slight tone to it on this side of her face, and there's a slight tone into areas of her eye orbit as well, sort of teeth around the mouth area. And even if I've gone over too much with this, I can then lift it back off with either a putty rubber, or I can sculpt it back in using things like, I'll give you a bit of an example. If I use this mono eraser, I can lift areas out quite sculpturally and pick areas out with a bit of cross action. It just lightens it up. So I'm not using any white chalk on this. This is a white mono eraser. So I'm lifting areas out, and it's quite sculptural, because if I find, oh, I've taken too much off, or that looks too dark, I can reapply it again and take it back off and reapply it again, and I'm not staining the paper too much. A little bit of that chin a little bit squarer. Again, I can still manipulate the shape a little bit. I've got flexibility in what I'm kind of working with. This is very rough application at the moment. I'm not being too pernickety about how getting it perfect. You can see the lightness on this side of her neck. So be careful about the edge. And how that comes down into her neck, there's a slight crease that has a bit of a shadow to it. Taking that edge out a little bit, because I think I can play around with a very soft shadow. which is definitely darker still. So it's about building layers in blocks, tones. This whole area is got a shadow to it. Her eyebrow is a lot heavier, obviously. The hair is definitely darker. And down this way. Around. I'm just trying to think. It just reminds me. I don't know if. Let's zoom back up here a second. You see the lady who did your portrait is her name's Sally, isn't it? I'm right. It drifted away from me about what her name was. I think it's Sally. So if you're still with us, you can confirm that what the name of your artist. It slipped my mind. I meant to say it. It slipped. I forgot to say it. The lady was name was Sally. Beautiful portrait that she did, and while we're checking out these artists as well, go and have a look at their Instagram pages. Go and see the other portraits that they've done, because often you get a little glimpse of what they do in 4 hours, and that's as much as people bother to look at. But when you have a look at their pages and you see the quality of their artwork, it's really impressive. There's so much more work that's done, but that's a competition anyway. I have done my application again this year. Not that I'll get in, but well worth having a look at. When you see that artist on there, don't judge them on just what they do in 4 hours. Go and have a look at what they actually do as an artist, and that's just for both of the what you call amateurs and professionals. Because some of the amateurs are really good, well worth checking out. I'm going to darken that whole area down, I think, and then the shadow that comes down. A bit of a darker bit just there. That might come out even further, Not too sure. Often I get to this stage and I literally brush everything right back. Take a cloth, glint-free cloth like this, and just push the charcoal into the page all over, just to give it a slight fuzziness, and then I can go back and refine it with darker marks and lighter marks as well. It helps kind of blend in and get rid of the white page underneath, because sometimes that white page pokes through that charcoal and still gives you your dark area a very sort of light look. I'm just kind of bouncing around when I was doing this eyebrow as well. Intentionally gone too heavy with that, because what I'm going to do is just sculpt this out, and Where I've made that eye really, really dark where it doesn't need to be, I can go back in with that mono eraser and just clean it up. See, I'm kind of just tickling the surface, so I'm just lifting off a little bit of graphite but not taking it back to the white page. And again, that's just more of a light indication of where things are going to go. I can refine it as I go along and adding more detail and refine those darker marks down and refine the lighter shape of the, say, sclera, the white of the eye, to kind of push that pupil looking off into that right hand direction a bit more. So I think I need to bring this line over here a little bit more. So you see that I'm kind of like pushing it. Maybe I've gone a bit too far, so I need to put that back in, and then I might go back over with my charcoal pencil to bring that back a little bit. So it's kind of like that push me, pull you type of thing. I know that the underneath of her eye is darker, you know, this sclera, but I'm looking at the size and scale of that whole eye as well. I've got to make sure I've got that right before I start worrying about things like size of pupils and things. So it is a case of like going backwards and forwards over it. Yeah, I'm going to start to see this out here as opposed to the size of where this eye. This looks like it's starting to get too wide, so I want to pull it back in again, because this gap here is way too wide. So if I start to pull that in, maybe I need to pull this eyebrow out a little bit further as well, so these two things start to meet. This eyebrow comes out, this comes in. I'm not necessarily narrowing the width of her face here, I'm just making sure that these marks start to match and add up. It might be a little bit lighter, this application. So if I do get it wrong, I can change it, I can move it out and put it back in. Again, I'm not worried about too much detail, about the perfection of hair and stuff like that. I'm literally blocking. It is very sculptural. Again, Sargent would have just spent more time considering marks and placing them once. I'm much more of a kind of messy, sculpturally type painter and maker of art, where I kind of sculpt and refine it as I'm trying to find the form. Is white chalk different from white pan pastel? You can use both. You can use white charcoal pencils, white pan pastel. You'll see yourself when you mix different mediums and different brands of mediums, it gives you slightly different effects, and it is because of the multitude of different combinations goes into the millions. I don't know it all, but you can use white chalk and white pan pastel. I don't tend to use white pan pastel an awful lot for doing this type of drawing. What I would tend to do is, if I've got a heavy white, solid white area, yeah, I would use pan pastel. But where I'm using, say, a white just to lift the highlight out, I would use the General's white chalk pencil or white charcoal pencil. I just like the brand. I think I've got one. Yeah, I've got one there. So that's the white. There we go. White charcoal pencil by General's. You can get these online. You can get them from Art and Home. One thing I say about Art and Home is a little art shop we have here in Northern Ireland. It's in Hollywood, in North Down. Because of lockdown, their physical shop is closed, but they are still doing things online. So I think they are doing free delivery to anything that's over 30 quid. Anybody buying art materials will know 30 quid will literally, you go in there and it's gone. So if you're buying, say, a Winsor & Newton or a Dale Arowney A2 drawing pad and a couple of pencils and so a pan pastel and some applicators, you know, your 30 quid's gone, you'll get free postage. If you're buying anything online at the minute from Amazon or anywhere from the UK or elsewhere, because of Brexit, it can be a bit of a nightmare getting things here, depending on the supplier they're looking at. Some suppliers are great, fine, and it's not been a problem. They're just posting stuff and everything's arriving on time. Other suppliers are using couriers, and the couriers are not doing split pallets, and there's delays galore. So yeah, if you can buy locally, shop locally. So yeah. Kathy, you have to go buy a birthday cake for a daughter. Oh, happy birthday to your daughter. Lovely getting back to drawing. Good to see you too. And yeah, fingers crossed, see you next week. I'll be here next week. But if not, you can watch it at your leisure. It's on YouTube, so you can catch up. You can catch up on all the weeks if you want to as well at your leisure. So yeah, I would say I've got white pan pastel in there as well that I'll use on occasion, just to prove I'm not lying to you. There it is. So if I'm doing large areas of something that's very white, and I'm using a grey tone paper, I'll use a pan pastel to do that as well. Do you have to use different sponges? Don't mix the sponges up because it gets very greyish. Often when you put white down and then put charcoal over the top of it, it gets like a bluish blue. So I'm more considerate about my whiteness, about where I'm placing those things, because I don't want to like mucky or greyish the paper. You know, you can go back over it again. It's more layers of charcoal over the top, and it's hard to get rid of the white chalk. So I'm more considerate. I tend to use white charcoal very sparingly. I can use it occasionally to really turn a form really subtly. So where I've built up a very subtle layer of charcoal to give me a turning of dark into light, I can use the white charcoal by laying lines of it over the surface to highlight that even a little bit further. It's not to make it very heavy lines, it's literally tickling the surface, and you can use an additive process to turn it into the light. But I tend to if I'm working on white paper, to let the white paper do that work for me with the charcoal, and then where it's really highlight, if I need to, use a white charcoal pencil to put those little dots in. It's normally things like a glinting of a metal buckle or a really strong highlight in an eye for a pupil, to get that real glint. But sometimes it's a little bit overpowering. If I can get away with it, I use a white paper. If I need to add it, I've got the flexibility of using a white charcoal pencil. So yeah, again, another long answer to your question. Hope that was okay. Guys, we've hit 4 o'clock already. I mean, those 2 hours just went by really quickly. And the portrait's not done, as normal. I'm going to continue on this and get it done for next week, so you can get to see the portrait. But even looking at this now, we're looking at it on the screen to this. There's similarities. There's areas that definitely need lots of work. there's room for development. When I'm looking at it, I can sort of look at the nose and go, okay, that nose might need to go up a little bit, but definitely adding a little bit of a shadow to this side of the nose can take off the length of it, because we're looking at the underneath of the nose over here. I think possibly the nose might be a little bit long, so I can see the width of her nose there, so this comes in this way a little bit, which takes off that, so it kind of widens out that eye, which means I can sculpt back into it again. So there's lots of things that you can build up and take off and build up and take off, and it'll take a few more hours to kind of play around with it. He did it in a couple of hours because he's literally considering placing the marks, because the artist that his more confident marks is me trying to replicate his confident marks takes longer as well. So yeah, there we are. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back again next week. Press subscribe if you like it. Share it if you like it with your artistic friends. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it as well. All these things kind of help to promote the page and get the message out there. And the more people we have having the conversation, literally the conversations are the more interesting part anyway, than listening to me waffle on. So the more content, the more questions you ask, the more you put in the chat bar, the better this is. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate all of the comments. It's been really good fun. See you again next week. Till then, take care. Alright. I'm just trying to find the off button over my face. Right. Where we are. There we are. Okay. So yes. Thank you so much for being here. See you again. Same time next week, 2 o'clock.